Welcome back to episode 3 of the Moving Average podcast.
Welcome.
I'm Maddie.
I'm Max.
Sorry for the delay. We actually did record an episode 3 back in the day, and then it was too much of a time between editing it or like rendering it and then posting it to like the stuff we talked about was kind of irrelevant. So, we're back at it now with 2 mics, twice the number of mics, and on multiple podcast platforms. That will be linked below, so choose the one you like best, or watch this. That's up to you. Apple and Spotify and any of the other ones.
The other ones, yeah.
Don't actually know.
We'll be there though.
But we're figuring that out. And it'll be linked below. Today, we're switching things a little, just going to try to cover like 5 main things. Rather than really going rapid fire with a bunch of stuff that, we'll talk an inch about. 5 main things instead.
Yeah.
Starting with Facebook's coin, the Libra. So they announced it yesterday, and I originally had it in here like before it was announced. There's a surprising number of leaks and information available about it before it was actually announced.
But only like the week or two before. It wasn't like...
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like... They've been working on it for like a year and a half.
Like so last year you told me.
Yeah. Because I had a friend who switched over into the blockchain department, so I knew they were working on something, but like... I really feel the information was really tight until the last like 2-3 weeks.
And was that tweet storm by the leader of the Libra Association? Was that the announcement? Like the very first announcement?
I'm not sure timeline, but he was the first one who talked about it in detail. But then Facebook released their own press release.
Right.
So
with, if you're not familiar, the Libra, I believe it's pronounced maybe Libra.
Libra. Wait.
It's a Facebook-made cryptocurrency initiative that's run by a handful of organizations, and it's actually a separate thing from Facebook. It's called the Libra Association because they know if they were in full governance of it, every single government in the world would come after them. But essentially what it is it's a asset-backed stablecoin. So it's a fixed, stable value of a cryptocurrency that people within the Facebook ecosystem, at first at least I'm assuming, can buy the cryptocurrency and use amongst those platforms as a way of sending money, paying for goods or services, and getting all of those benefits of a cryptocurrency, so sending it extremely fast, cheaply. It is a blockchain of sorts that's actually kind of a gray area.
Aren't stablecoins usually backed by an asset?
Yeah, so Facebook,
So what is it backed?
They made a very good decision the worry was they would just have it backed by the US dollar. And surprisingly, with their partners that they announced, which is a ton of partners.
Yeah. Uber, Lyft, was it Visa,
MasterCard, PayPal,
a lot
Stripe,
of massive companies.
eBay, Spotify, Vodafone. Surprisingly, none of them, in terms of venture capital, they have Andreessen Horowitz, Breakthrough Initiatives, Ribbit Capital,
Yeah.
Thrive Capital, and Union Square Capital.
A lot of great firms.
No banks.
Oh.
So, and that was surprising in terms of like how they're going to back this in terms of assets. And instead of doing just a single currency like the US dollar, they're doing a basket of currencies. So it's like some of a bunch of different currencies, which is pretty interesting of a move. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out just in terms of like, because essentially it's just another currency that's...
An index.
Yeah, it's like an index of all the currencies. And technically, I guess it'd be a risk-adjusted currency asset.
Risk-adjusted, yeah.
But they also partnered with Coinbase, which is why I'm excited about it. And the direction I like this conversation going is how is it going to affect crypto? Because the natural comparison that people make is the Libra versus Bitcoin, which I think is kind of a faulty comparison, but when you look at Libra versus every single alternative stablecoin, especially when you're looking at like Ripple, that's where it really comes into play, because not only does Facebook have the partners that none of them have, but they also have the reach of 2 billion people. And what they're pushing is good, like the bringing banking and digital banking to 2 billion people.
Yeah, and a big thing, and USV the venture capital firm talked about this a lot of why they joined on, is Facebook has removed itself from the organization and in like the council that's made up of these big companies and big VC firms, they've created themselves as equals. So Facebook doesn't inherently have any more power than any other company over this stablecoin. So that's pretty significant.
And each of them paid $10 million, each of those partners, to be an equal member.
For the node?
Yeah, and have optionally become $10 million was to join, and it gives them the option of becoming a validator node operator, which for the blockchain is
creates value,
transactions.
Processes,
Interesting part is, well, it actually says right here, gain one more vote in the Libra Association Council and be entitled to a share of the dividends from interest earned of the Libra reserve. So essentially they are a bank, and they'll have reserves, and that can then be invested in increased money. So I guess that's the play if you're a partner. I think it's particularly interesting. There's kind of two things that are interesting to me. One is it's not really decentralized in any manner. Like governance, they made some good efforts with that, like the association, the equal members.
Yeah.
The blockchain isn't a distributed ledger. It's one ledger. And I don't know, obviously I just don't know as much about the technology side of it. But I was reading about that on Twitter yesterday, that it is a single ledger, like a centralized ledger that's verified by those people, by those associations. So it's not actually decentralized from a blockchain perspective, which is interesting. I think that level of decentralization is more important for something like Bitcoin than for...
Yeah.
But that still gives those organizations a lot of control over it. But then as you look towards its comparison to Bitcoin, that's what gets me interested, because one, I don't see them competing at all. If anything, I see their relationship, like the US dollar to gold, when the US dollar was backed by gold, is the Libra to Bitcoin, ultimately, is how I see it. Because especially with their partner with Coinbase, whether they have access to Coinbase, like using the Libra, or Facebook does their own marketplace or exchange of sorts, that is bringing those same 2 billion people on a digital currency with access to buy Bitcoin, which is a finite deflationary asset that would serve in this digital economy or financial system the similar role as gold in the real world.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah, extremely.
Because ultimately they could print, like, this is, unlimited Libra. And it doesn't really solve like the inflation, or because it's tied to fiat currency, so it still has those drawbacks.
And Bitcoin, just again, there's a finite amount of Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think with this happening, and the Bitcoin went on a run up to the announcement.
9K, yep.
And it's still held 9K.
Yesterday. Yeah.
So I think the general outlook is that yes, it isn't a direct competitor. It doesn't render Bitcoin useless. If anything, it adds value to it. And it'll be interesting to see if that lines up as this actually is launched and in people's hands and pockets, as combined with the halving next year.
Yeah.
That'll be pretty interesting to see how it affects the price of Bitcoin. I think there was one other thing I wanted to say. With Bitcoin's recent rise, what we've seen is the last time it hit 9,000, it was mostly the FOMO effect of people downloading Coinbase, putting money in, and that's why it was there was no support to that price. That's why it just dropped. This time it's been huge transactions, institutional sized transactions, leading up to its price right now.
Bigger partners accepting it, more people.
And it'll be interesting if that continues happening.
Yeah.
Where the new bottom will be, after this bull run, if the people with Libra is really going to be the FOMO driver for this bull market of Bitcoin, where is that bottom of institutional support going to come? I don't know, but that's kind of the perspective I've been looking at Bitcoin in general right now, is when the price starts slipping upwards from just all the consumers buying it, it's not going to hold.
Yeah.
But the institutions, obviously, they move way slower, using a ton of money. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts Libra and vice versa.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that covers it. Oh, also, Jason Calacanis got the @Libra tag on Twitter. So the actual Libra one is Libra _. Which is absurd, because I imagine they offered him a stupid amount of money, but
Jason Calacanis also hates Facebook. He hates Mark Zuckerberg. So this is just so funny. I don't know how he got out of that, but
and he definitely has fuck you money. Like, he doesn't need their money for a Twitter tag. Yeah, he probably takes way more.
He was doing it on purpose. Well, he also ripped it in with a company he's running the inside the newsletter. So like he's running the newsletter on it, but just really funny. He's savage.
And I guess before we move on, the last thing to mention is one, it's really meant to be a medium of exchange, like a currency that's used for things, not a Bitcoin that's a store of value. And two, it's fully backed, 100% backed. It's not fractional reserve like you look at the U.S. banking system or anything like that, which is good. That'll make it even more stable. Moving on.
Chewy.
Yeah, so I didn't know about Chewy before reading this article. So Chewy, for those of you that don't know, the startup made in 2011?
E-commerce.com, just making it really easy to buy pet products, essentially. And funny, if we look at parallels, there were a couple big companies that did this in the 2001, internet bubble, that raised a lot of money and failed. Chewy comes out, does this 10 years later, becomes very successful. So that's when you always think about like market timing when you're looking at startups and stuff. Like the same idea can fail 3 times in a row in 3 different decades, and then the next one, that's when it's right. So that's pretty interesting. But Chewy's doing really well. IPO.
Yeah, so they sold to PetSmart a few years back, and then PetSmart IPO'd it, but they're still the majority holder.
Yeah.
Which because they IPO'd, they're still a public company. What does the legality of that look like?
Oh, well, it's pretty. They've always kept it like a separate business. Okay. Like often in M&A transactions, when a larger company like buys a smaller one, often they're not like actually buying 100% of the shares. Mm-hmm. Often they're only becoming the majority holder, but like all you hear about is acquisition. Like you don't actually see the number breakdown. So I'm sure the founders still have a lot of a decent amount of equity. So like PetSmart legality can legally like pretty easily separate that off and IPO that business separately. And also because PetSmart's gigantic, they have a lot of different businesses underneath them.
And they're killing it, Chewy. They IPO'd at $22 a share, and
what valuation was that?
Let me look at that. Stock first trade was that's what it went up to. They plan to sell at least 46.5 million shares at 22 apiece, which would bring in $1 billion more, with an initial valuation of $9 billion.
$9 billion, nice.
And then
it's like where Zoom started.
Yeah, and that's at 22.
Yeah.
And now it's at 35.
Sheesh.
It's like a few days.
It's pop. Yeah.
Which brings it into the larger conversation. I don't have this on me, or like in front of me, but there was a list of the companies that IPO'd in the last year, and all of them...
All the tech IPOs.
Gains. Yeah, specifically. Huge gains. Beyond Meat, Chewy, Zoom, etc. Then two of them, the two largest maybe, went down, and that's Uber and Lyft.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple different things at play, though. Yeah, Uber and Lyft are massive. They raised a ton of money in the private markets. Or possibly more so Uber, maybe possibly more overvalued in the private markets. And also, a lot of times when like lesser known tech companies like a Chewy or Zoom or something, when they IPO, for some reason they're priced a little lower than they're actually valued. And so, sometimes the first couple of days when it pops, that often can be confused with success, but actually it was just pretty underpriced when it IPO'd. So I still kind of firmly believe that the public market is a long game as well. For any IPO, I'm not like caring too much about the first 6 to 12 months. That being said, Uber and Lyft are losing a ton of money and these other companies aren't. So that's obviously something to consider a lot as well. But I'm not crazy concerned about the first 6 to 12 months of a public company, especially when they've been private for the last 10 years.
So do you think the real cause behind that is just because Uber and Lyft stayed private for so long that they were forced to have the higher valuation rather than underprice it because all of that private investment at the higher valuations already?
I think possibly. And they're both playing the same game that these other companies aren't really playing. Uber and Lyft are playing a winner takes all game right now.
Yeah.
Zoom isn't really doing that. Beyond Meat isn't doing that. Chewy's not doing that. So they're not playing the same game. So to me, they're just different businesses. Not saying I don't like those businesses more.
Right.
Like Zoom is awesome. Profitable, doing crazy numbers in a hard market. So, props to them. But I'm not insanely concerned. She's going crazy. She's loving it. Yeah. But I don't know. That's my thoughts on the first 6 to 12 months for a tech IPO.
And if you invested in just every tech IPO this year, you'd be doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Of course, those are super risky investments.
Yeah.
If you put your money in right at the beginning.
Snap last year.
Yeah.
Risky and very risky investment. So
I wonder if there's probably an interesting correlation between valuation and performance at IPO. I bet as you go lower in valuation, there's just consistently higher performance overall.
Yeah.
Which would bring validity to the argument that Uber and Lyft's biggest mistake was just staying private too long and having that valuation go up as a private company, and not because the public, the market doesn't understand how those private investors got to those numbers. Whereas when they're smaller, like it's at least less of a moonshot or an astronomical figure to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on. Brex, the corporate card for startups, raised $100 million, which brings them to some absurd number total.
It's like 250
million total in 2 years. They're 2 years old. They're out of Y Combinator. The guys went in for Brex.
Great story.
I forget what it was. Do you know that story well?
Well, they're I think they're South American or Central American. They came up to YC with some idea. I don't remember what the idea was, but essentially they were denied credit cards for their startup. They were trying to apply for a business credit card. They would get denied, and they were like in YC. They had some funding, so they were really frustrated. They were confused. So they just built their own need, and apparently a lot of other people have that same need.
So the way they do it is they serve as an underwriter, and they set the credit limits, but not just based on credit history and like a FICO score. They use factors like who's invested in it and the startup's cash balance and cash flow history, which is a very niche-specific way of doing that for a startup and different types of startups, which actually, and I kind of understand the growth equity play there now, because there are a variety. I think life sciences was the first place they targeted, but when you look at any individual niche, when you look at those variables, like who's invested in it, what's the cash balance, their cash flow, and like those more qualitative factors than just what their credit score is, the founders themselves or anything. As you go from niche to niche, the sweet spot or the ideal range of those that changes. So there's any other market they go to, the banks are gonna still not be able to give a very specialized rate to those niches. So they can kind of bounce from niche to niche, and then just modify the way that they actually calculate their underwriting and credit limits. And then just take over niche by niche, because the larger credit institutions will never be able to get that level of granularity.
Yeah, and their benefits are awesome. Startups loving their benefits. One complaint I have heard from a couple of founders, even at YC, are that they're scaling too fast. They don't have enough customer support. Which makes sense. They're getting slammed with new customers, and they just haven't scaled out the support side of the business enough.
Train a support person?
I don't know, but that's a complaint I do hear kind of often. Is that they struggle with the customer support, but other than that, love the card and the benefits.
Cool looking card too.
Yeah. What's about Sequoia Scouts?
Yeah, so I'm gonna let you run with this, because I don't actually know much about them.
Okay, so TechCrunch did a big feature about the Sequoia Scout program. So, Scout programs for venture capital funds are not really publicized a lot. But essentially, they find well-connected people, founders, maybe younger people who aren't at a VC firm or running their own company or something like that. Just people with great networks, and they start giving them money to write very early stage checks, and that has paid off extremely well. For example, Jason Calacanis, arguably one of the greatest angel investors out right now, he started as a Sequoia Scout. 8-9 years ago or so that kind of started out his angel career really, and one of his first checks was Uber, and that 50K went to 240 million.
And was that part of this, like Sequoia was done with that?
Yeah.
So is that, are they literally giving Calacanis the money, and the check is written in Calacanis' name, and it's just an agreement that he'll split whatever with them, or?
Essentially, so I'm not 100% on the financial structure of it because they keep it pretty low key. Yeah. But a couple of firms do it differently. Like some give them a percentage of the carry, some actually allow the founders to write the check in their name. But it's really cool. Sequoia is probably the most public with their program, but there's a lot of funds are doing it now. I know First Round, Bessemer, a couple others, but they keep it pretty low key. Yeah. So hard positions to get. Very competitive and pretty private.
It makes sense that the legality doesn't really seem to matter too much because when it comes down to it, if Sequoia is having a scout like Jason Calacanis, it's very trust-based. They don't have a lot of scouts. Like, they're not using hundreds and thousands. So it's a trust-based thing. So the legality of it probably doesn't actually matter too much, the exact structure of who's it written in and that kind of stuff. It does open up, like, the door. What? There's a phrase for that. It does...
Get your foot in the door.
Well, I'm thinking, like, what else is there going on? What else don't we know about? Like, this is already a very private, very seldomly understood or little understood industry. Even the people that operate in it. Well, like, when you're at the tip of the top, I'm sure they know everything that's going on. But there's probably entire structures of relationships and systems that are just above the public level of knowledge.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of deals, especially in industries like venture capital. But you want to talk about Beyond Meat?
Yes.
Just on last topic, yeah.
Yes. So Beyond Meat, there's a specific reason I'm bringing this up. We brought them up earlier because they were a example of one of the companies that IPO'd and then their stock price shot up. They make non-meat substitutes, like plant-based substitutes for food.
Yeah. Not for me.
And so I haven't tried it. I don't know if they're the Impossible Burger or there's two burgers that are big. I'm a big meat guy. I really like meat, so I'm not the expert on this subject. So I'm not either. I also love meat, but I have a friend.
Okay.
Who doesn't like meat.
Okay.
And I asked about this because, especially with the way their stock price is going and their valuation, it's kind of like, oh, they're going to replace all meat. They're going to take everything over.
Please don't. Okay.
But the problem is, what they're after right now, and of course this could just be part of a long-term plan, what they're after right now is a burger that looks, tastes, and feels and smells like meat, but isn't meat. But this friend I was talking to, her reaction was, I don't want a burger that tastes, smells, looks, or feels like meat. She'd prefer a vegan burger or I guess not a turkey burger, a vegan burger, a vegetarian option, which kind of reframes the way I look at Beyond Meat in the first place. Because they're not, who are they pleasing with that,
I mean, I think there's still definitely a big market for that. I mean, vegan burgers have been around for like bean burgers. Like, I've tried a bean burger. But
that has different tastes. So I guess it could be specifically the crowd they're targeting is probably the loudest voice to address at the beginning is the people that are really in it for like animal cruelty reasons, for like moral reasons. They don't actually have anything.
And there's a market for that. Food. There's a lot of people that and it's increasing.
But with their stock price increase and their compared to like their actual revenue numbers and margin numbers, their stock price is huge. They're like almost still looks like a private valuation in the public market, which is interesting to see in the first place. But and
they're not really a tech company, so that's even more interesting. Yeah. Tech companies are supposed to get that 20x revenue, 18x revenue.
And if they're gonna get that, which it seems like their valuation is implying, that means that their ultimate market needs to be massive if they're gonna continue growing like that for 5 or 10 years. And that thought was the first time I was like, maybe that's not actually the future. Necessarily.
Yeah, well, you must have a pretty smart friend, but...
But then ultimately it's societal tastes, right? Like, the only reason they're making it taste like meat is because people like meat right now.
And will that change?
And how long does that take? Can that happen in a 5-year, 10-year period, or is that a century-long thing?
Yeah.
Multiple generations. I don't know. I don't know much about the food industry in the first place.
I'm getting a lot more into the beverage space right now because that's kind of going crazy. But not so much more into the food.
I heard they were buying their own products in stores. It was for quality check reasons. There was an article about that.
That's strange.
That was, to some extent you understand. I think where it became an issue was the quantity of how much. But I don't know enough about that to really go into that. But
speculate.
It's not the best
Yeah.
for a growing company.
Well,
that's the last topic.
I think that's it.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
On this one.